Welcome to it, sports fans. A different ball game with me, MKT. Friday in the Republic of South Africa. A lovely day it has been indeed. I have had a lovely day, thus it is lovely. Welcome. We've got a great guest tonight. I'm going to get straight to it. I've got the lovely Woude Muller with me. Woude, a different ball game. It's Friday. Good to see you.
Yes. I'm very excited for this weekend. I'm very excited for our guest. I'm also excited that Formula One is starting this weekend. So if you're looking for me this weekend, I will be in front of the TV watching sports the entire weekend.
What a snowfest. What a snowfest motorsport is. I cannot think of anything worse, but enjoy. Enjoy. All right. Good stuff. Okay. Woude and Kimi, or Woude Sport. I don't know. Is Kimi Räikkönen still racing?
He is still racing, but I really like Ricciardo. So.
Daniel Ricciardo, Australian wonder kid at Red Bull. Okay, yep. Good for Daniel Ricciardo. Very good. Okay, well, enjoy that old people sport. But luckily, we're going to talk a little bit of rugby and football because we are still alive and kicking and don't like to nap on Sundays to cars making noise. Got a very exciting guest today, a real pioneer of the sporting world, marketing-wise, was part of the panel that started the English Premier League, so can't wait to chat to him. We will bring him to you in the next 25 minutes or so. I cannot wait. But we're going to start off with some football talk. Of course, Friday means the Friday Five. And then today, Woude, of course, will preview the return of rugby in Australia. And then, of course, the Torera Te Cup. I mean, it's a ridiculous name. Just call it Super Rugby. I've probably just offended half of the Polynesian community around the world. Hashtag sorry for that. But we can all live with it. It is rugby in New Zealand. It is Jacinda's tournament. They are packing the stadiums in New Zealand. Good for them. Let's get straight into it. As you know, every single Friday, we do the Friday Five. This week, I am going to give you the 5 greatest wingers in Premier League history. Here we go. At number 5, in 2000, he replaced the ultimate Rolls-Royce, Mark Overmars. He came in 2000 and the Gunners fans were torn apart. They couldn't believe that Barcelona had snatched their Rolls-Royce and David Dein and Arsenal had said, here we go. Listen, in the 80s, France had their Carré Magique of Platini, Giresse, Tigana and Fernandes. Arsenal, in the noughties, had their very own Carré Magique, Bergkamp, Leonberg, and the fourth part of that square was Super Bobby. Bobby was sensational. At number 5, Robbie Perez. In 1996, at number 4, and in 1996, this guy scored that goal against Wimbledon. It was sensational, and he changed the landscape for himself and indeed his club forevermore. He redefined the art of the set piece and crossing in England. 6 Premier League titles, 300,000 haircuts later, and a Spice Girl later. Ladies and gentlemen, at number 4, the one and only Mr. Golden Balls, David Beckham. So this one's an interesting story. Fergie, in 2004, went to PSV and offered them £4 million for this particular winger. They said, for £4 million, you can afford the shirt that this player has signed. Forget it at that number. At Chelsea, the Roman Abramovich era had just rolled in. They brought £12 million to the table. They brought this flying winger from Holland to England. Ladies and gentlemen, 205, 206 is all he needed. Much like the Brazilian Ronaldo, all he needed was one season to show me he was the best there was in the league. Him, Duff, Drogba, 05-06. Unstoppable. At number 3, the Flying Dutchman, and quite easily the fastest receding hairline I have ever seen. At number 3, Arjen Robben. In number 2, so the second place guy, there's a very interesting story. Alan Hansen famously said, and this did not age well, he famously said, you cannot win with the kids. We now know that these kids in particular were all right. There was Scholes, there was Beckham, there were the Nevilles, there was Butt, and there was some guy with the most unbelievably hairy chest we have ever seen. Famous, of course, for scoring that goal when Man United were one man down, He ran from the edge of his own box, slammed it into the top corner, and history, because that year they went on to win the treble. He is quite simply the most decorated player the Premier League has ever seen. Nobody will ever match this guy. 6th Premier League, 6 times he was in the team of the year. 13 Premier League titles. 1-3. That is 13 Premier League titles. At number 2, the Welsh Wizard, the real Welsh Wizard. Ladies and gentlemen, number 2, Ryan Giggs. Now, at number 1, great story here. 2003, 6th of August, Manchester United go away to Sporting Lisbon. They're playing, John O'Shea had the worst night of his life ever. It is said that at halftime, then CEO Peter Kenyon was asked at halftime to go and negotiate with Sporting Lisbon's director at halftime. Alex Ferguson said, "We are not leaving here." He made the bus stay for an extra hour and a half, is what the reports are saying. He said, "We are not leaving here until this young man's signature is with us." When he arrived at Manchester United, he refused to take on the number 7 jersey. But to this day, if you go to the Stretford end, this guy was unbelievable. Remember in his last season, he scored 31 goals from right wing, basically right midfield. But you go to the Stretford end today, they still sing it. They sing it loud. They sing it proud. They say he played on the left. He played on the right. That boy Ronaldo made England look shite. And quite rightly, at number 1, there is only one. Cristiano Ronaldo. A quite unbelievable player. Indeed. Quite divine indeed. As you can hear that music, he is king of the land. Cristiano Ronaldo, unparalleled. No winger has ever been him. He won World Player of the Year, first man to win it in the Premier League, only man to probably win it for a long, long time coming. At the age of 23, he was World Player of the Year. Sensational. From right mid, he got 42 goals all in that last season before Fergie let him go to Real Madrid to live out his dream. Cristiano Ronaldo, nothing like it. Dave, give me that top 5. Because I know there'll be plenty of arguments. Everybody wants their wingers in. But I'm afraid that list is pretty rock solid. Pires, sensational. Part of the Invincibles. Beckham, right? United dominated everything. They'd won the title essentially by February throughout his time. Arjen Robben, I've always called him the Ronaldo. So Brazilian Luis de Lima of the English Premier League. Arjen Robben, all he needed one season was, that's different. He invented the term cut inside and shoot. Brought it in, you knew he was going to the left foot. Nothing you could do about it. Banger. He only improved on that at Bayern Munich, and he went on to achieve everything you can achieve in club football. Number 2, Ryan, 15 titles, 6 times in the Player of the Season. He's so good, Ryan Giggs, he converted to defensive midfield and won Player of the Year. Voted by his colleagues. Unstoppable. Ryan Giggs, between 18 and 27. He debuted at Man United at 16, did Ryan Giggs, by the way. And never stopped playing at Manchester United under Fergie in those times. At number 1, I mean, come on, Viva Ronaldo. Viva Ronaldo. Viva Ronaldo. You cannot, you know what, I can't wait to hear from people. If you have a problem with that list, I cannot wait to hear from you because that looks pretty bulletproof to me. Folks, that is the Friday 5. Next week, I will give you our centre-backs. Next Friday will be the top 5 centre-backs in Premier League history. Cristiano Ronaldo is king of the wingers. Speaking of wingers and flying athletes, the rugby is back in Australia and indeed New Zealand. We're looking forward to Super Rugby this weekend. Let me hand you over to Woude Muller with the skip pass.
Before I get to my predictions, I just want to have a look at our highlights for the week, headlines for the week, really. Beauden Barrett has signed a $1.5 million deal to go play in Japan, which means he'll miss the 2021 Super Rugby season for the Blues. And then he will be back for New Zealand Internationals and he'll play for the rest of the 2 years until the 2023 World Cup. He'll play for the Blues. For me, this is not really any surprise, and I'm not entirely sure why it's a surprise for a lot of people because he made this deal with New Zealand Rugby and with the Blues before he signed his contract with them. So this is not exactly entirely something new for New Zealand rugby players to do. They all take a sabbatical. I mean, Sam Whitelock just returned from Japan and Brodie Retallick also doing it now. And there were other players that also did it in the past. In fact, I think this is quite a thing that New Zealand rugby does anyway, and that they've been doing for a long time. It's a way for the players to close their salary gaps that they get. So it's a way for New Zealand to make sure that they're keeping their players and don't have to pay them that much, and they can't pay them what they pay them in Europe or in Japan. But it's also a way for these players to make sure that their body gets a rest in between World Cup, so that they can also play for longer. And New Zealand can that way keep their top players to play for them for longer. They choose Japan over Europe because they say it's less physical in Japan. And honestly, when they lose these players, it's not exactly like the standard of rugby in New Zealand is dropping. So I think it's a good thing that these players are going. They take away a break, come back, and be ready for the next World Cup. My second headline, Carlos Spencer and the Hurricanes rugby team have parted ways. Some might call it that they're forced to part ways. Others might say that you got sacked or you got fired, whatever you want to call it. He's no longer be their assistant coach. He's been their assistant coach since 2019. But the Hurricanes rugby said it is due to the financial uncertainty with this whole COVID-19 situation. Carlos has now come out and said that before lockdown, they've already spoken about this whole situation, that he might not stay on after the Super Rugby. So it's also not a surprise that this happened, but now he said that he's just not going to stay there anymore. He's leaving after they told him that his contract was going to end after Super Rugby. Aotearoa, and also can't say it. Anyway, I just kind of feel like he's thrown a tantrum. He knew this was going to happen. Why not stick it out for the season, be there, and then look for other opportunities after that? So I don't think it's a great move from his side. I think it's pretty childish and very unprofessional. Third one, unfortunately, the Blitzboks had to settle with finishing as runners-up to New Zealand in the 7th season. Unfortunately, 7th had to be cancelled, or the rest of the tournaments had to be cancelled because of COVID-19. So New Zealand, I think, are the well-deserved winners for this one. They did win 3 out of 6 tournaments, and they had 2 podium finishes in the rest of them. So they were topping the log at 115 points. The Blitzboks were only 11 points behind them, 104. Fiji was 3rd and Australia 4th on 83 and 81 points respectively. So I think it's a real pity that they couldn't play the rest of it. It could have been a chance for the Blitzboks to come back and actually make up that gap. They still had, I think, 4 tournaments, London, Paris, Singapore, and Hong Kong left. So they would have been able to close that if they had managed to play better rugby. In the first 6 tournaments, they were pretty inconsistent. They won Dubai and LA, and that very exciting final in LA. They made it to the finals in Cape Town and in Sydney. But in Vancouver, they finished 4th when they lost to Canada in the 3rd and 4th playoff. They lost to New Zealand in the semi-final with their 2 yellow cards in that match. But then they also finished 10th in Hamilton, which was their worst ever finish in a series or in a tournament ever. So like I said, I think New Zealand's the well-deserved winners on this one. New Zealand's 7th women's team were also crowned winners for them, but that's also no surprise. They topped the podium in 4 out of their 5 rounds that they played. The only problem that I could potentially see with this whole series or rest of the year get cancelled is to get the schedule for next year, or the standings for the Olympics next year. Because the standing for the Olympics is dependent on what happened in the year before. So they're probably going to have to look at the 2021 results also to be able to get that standings and make some adjustments depending on what happens. They're hoping that they will resume in early December, where the new series, new tournaments resume in Dubai and then in Cape Town. So hopefully that will happen so they can all be ready for the Olympics next year. So those are my 3 headlines. Let me know what you think. If there's anything else that you think is newsworthy, let me know that also. Well, anything you've got to say before I go into my predictions?
Not much, really. I'm not really a Bowden Barrett fan. I think the hype should be over, so let him go. Yeah, he can play wing, like whatever. Let him go. Other than that, Carlos Spencer's been everywhere. So Yeah, I think Beauden Barrett's overrated, but let's move on, you know?
No, let's move on from that.
They got plenty. They got Atari Black. They got Moanga. They'll be fine. And his brother's better than him anyway.
Yeah. Well, talking about his brother, let's move on to Super Rugby. We're going to start with Super Rugby Australia. So this is their first week back. The Reds did host the Waratahs today, and they did beat the Waratahs 32-26 today. I must be honest, I didn't watch that match. I only watched the highlights, and from what I've seen and what I read, it wasn't too pretty. But I don't think we could have really expected anything more from that. It was their first game back after their whole break and everything. So there were also quite a few penalties, not as many as there was in the first round of New Zealand Super Rugby. But hopefully that will get better as we go. Then tomorrow we've got the Brumbies hosting the Rebels. I reckon these will probably be the two top teams in the Australian competition anyway. The Brumbies were second on the overall log, Super Rugby log before lockdown. The Rebels were the second Australian team, very far behind the Brumbies. But we know the state that Australian rugby is in at the moment. So for me, this is pretty easy one to call. I think the Brumbies will take it easily. I don't think it's going to be that pretty. I think there will be quite a lot of handling errors. But the Brumbies will probably also take the competition pretty easily. If we look at their teams, the Brumbies do have quite an injury list despite the fact that they had a break. Tom Banks is out, so this will be Hansen's first start in the number 15 jersey. Solomon Cutter and Ryan Longengang also out. So Tom Wright and Andy Murray is starting on the wings. James Slipper is starting ahead of Scott Theo at loose prop. And then they also have a new second row with Douglas and Swain starting together for the first time. The Rebels have 4 debutants that are in the starting 23. Michael Stolberg and Kemeny are starting for the first time. And then they've also got 2 rookies on the bench. So Mafu and Hosea will be playing off the bench. So I think for this one, Brumbies will take it easily. Can't see anything else happening in that match. More exciting, if we move on to New Zealand Super Rugby, this is their 4th week, so they're getting a little bit more settled. The Highlanders are taking on the Crusaders in Dunedin and the Chiefs versus the Hurricanes in Hamilton. Highlanders Crusaders, this is the first time that they will play each other in 2 years. Their last match, in Dunedin, the last match that they would have played, they got cancelled due to terrorist attacks that they had in New Zealand at that stage. That game, though, that they did have, the Highlanders did beat the Crusaders in Dunedin. But I don't think it's going to happen this time. The Highlanders has been a little bit better than what people have expected, but we've just seen the depth and the craziness that Crusaders bring to the pitch. So I don't think the Highlanders will be able to do that. They had to make a change. If we look at their team, Highlanders made this great change. They do have Geordie Barrett back. Okay, Collins is starting on the bench. This must have been a late change for them. So Geordie Barrett is back. Michael Collins will be starting also on the wing. Oh no, my bad. Michael Collins will be starting on 15 after Scott Gregory's shocker last weekend. I'm already thinking of the Hurricanes games. I'm really excited about Geordie Barrett back. So he will be starting at 15. Midfield stays the same. There's still no Josh Ione. Hopefully we'll see him. No Milner Scudder just yet, but Milner Scudder is playing in a club match this weekend, so we could look forward to seeing him next weekend. And then Ash Dixon is starting on the bench with Coltman starting at hooker. So I think they're obviously looking for some power off the bench in the second half. So I reckon Ash Dixon will probably come on quite early in the second half. The Crusaders had a bit of a rotation. Their front row stays the same, the lock's the same. Callan Grace, unfortunately, is out with injury. He needs an operation, so Blackadder will start at 6. It's not a like-for-like player, I don't think, but Blackadder's not bad. Tom Christie is also a very massive machine on the flank. So the rest of them stays the same. One big change, though, is that Severeese got dropped to the bench. Will Jordan is starting at wing, and David Avili is starting in the number 15 jersey. I think this is a bit of a relief for the Highlanders because Will Jordan has been absolutely excellent on the fullback position. But Havili might start. It could be coming from the top from New Zealand rugby. That's where they would like to start him for New Zealand rugby. So we'll have to see. But that is quite an interesting change for them. And George Bridge is getting rested this weekend. So I think also quite an interesting one would be Mitch Hunt and Richie Mwanga. They are teammates. So I think Mitch Hunt has definitely got something to prove in the number 10 jersey. So we'll have to see what happens there. For me, Crusaders will take this one, even though they are playing away. I don't think it will be by a very big margin. I reckon probably about 6 to 8 points. But I think the Crusaders will take that. The last match on Sunday is the Chiefs versus the Canes. Both of these teams have been winless in this Super Rugby competition. The Chiefs are forced to make a few changes to their starting lineup due to injuries. And Anton Leonard-Brown is sidelined with a concussion. So that means that Tua Pahea will start in the number 12 jersey and Mane in the number 13. There were also talks that Damian McKenzie had a knee niggle in the week, but he's in, so we'll have to see if he stays in that number 15 jersey for long enough. And there also talks that Sam Cane was sick, so hopefully he can play this weekend. So we'll have to see. The Hurricanes made 4 changes. They are back to full strength with, like I said, Jordy Barrett back in the 15 jersey, Kobus van Baker starting at 14. So Goosen is dropped to the bench, and Umaga Jensen and Leomate is starting in the midfield. The rest pretty much the same. Caleb Haskell's back on the bench for the number 10 backup. Yeah, the rest of them pretty much the same. And Scrafton is in at number 5. So quite interesting teams. I do think, though, that the Chiefs could possibly take this one. They are in for a very much needed win. Only because I think they're playing at home, they might take this one, but not by far. Those are my predictions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Crusaders to win and the Chiefs to win.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Okay. I don't know. I still don't love Aaron Cruden at fly half, but okay. Let it be so. Warren Gatland developing Warren Ball. Yeah, that'll be an interesting weekend of rugby. Interesting to see how Mackenzie does at fullback. So it's Mackenzie playing the better Barrett. I think we'll see who wins out there.
And look, there's also a massive difference in their size, and we know how Jordy Barrett can kick. We know the last time they played the Chiefs, the Canes beat them 20-24 with that very last minute, well, actually extra time penalty that Jordy Barrett kicked. So he can definitely get the points in the pressure moments. So it will be interesting. Look, it can really go either way for me here, just purely because, like I said, I've been saying I've lost complete faith in the Chiefs. I just think they need a win. So this might be the one for them.
Okay. Well, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. I think I don't see that being a high-skill game because both teams aren't playing very well right now. I'm excited to finally see, I think, Ardie Savea at number 8 because he is such a weapon. And I think when you have him at blindside flank, you kind of leave him out the game. He should have the ball in his hands as much as possible. So off the set piece, he can be a weapon if you use him correctly.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I hope, he's one of my favorite players, and I think he was probably needed to rather win Player of the Year last year. So I really love him. I think he's a great player, and his impact from 8 will be very interesting to see.
There you have it. We'll have a review on Monday, see exactly how our predictions go. It'll be interesting to see. Crusaders, wow, they are looking unstoppable. A little bit of squad rotation there, maybe, with Sevu Reece, who is it's scary to think he's probably the backup for the All Blacks at 14. It's out of this world. So we'll have to see how that unpacks. Okay, Woude Muller with the skip pass. A very good Woude. I enjoyed that one. Looking forward to all of the rugby this weekend. Welcome back to Australia. Welcome back to Super Rugby. And as they keep rolling out more sports around the world, we're going to feel like the world is becoming normal. Coming up next, a man who brought the thought of marketing and entertainment into the space of sport and changed the face of it forevermore. He was part of launching what is the biggest product, easily the biggest product, in his words, the only entertainment that is bigger than football is sex. Well, he created the biggest product in the world in entertainment. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest coming up after this. Yes, I am pumped up for this guest. Oh man, such an honor to have him here. We're going to get straight into it. Let me introduce our guest for today on this Friday, ladies and gentlemen. Introducing a man who has met the Napolitana Mafia and lives to tell the story. He believed that football was not just a sport, it is entertainment. He went to America, returned, and brought with him the goodie bags of American entertainment to the European continent. Ladies and gentlemen, the man who could make a deal by selling ice to the Eskimos, ladies and gentlemen, the original super agent, Mr. John Smith.
Hey, how do I follow that, Umbuelo? It's a pleasure to be with you.
It is an honor to be with you. It is an absolute honor to be with you. What do you think of my Michael Buffer? Because I love boxing as well. I'm huge on boxing.
Well, I'm slightly biased because I've got a boxing agency that I own a piece of as well with Callum Smith in it. So,
whoa, let's stop there. We were going to talk football.
Yeah.
By the way, for those who don't know who Callum Smith is he is one of the best middleweights in the world, by the way, an unbelievable fighter who's been denied the fight against Triple G. He hasn't had Canelo yet. He wanted Billy Joe Saunders. So, hey, let's talk about that.
Well, I mean,
I did not know that.
I only own a piece of it, and I kind of bought into it because I had Dalton Smith and Callum Smith in the agency. I thought they must be family members somewhere. And also, they had in the stable a wonderful heavyweight who you're going to hear so much about in years to come, called Delicious Ori. Now, you need to remember
Great
that name. How could you forget? I mean, that's why I bought into the agency, because of his name. So, and he's wonderful, and he was going to be a star of the Olympics, and hopefully will be next year. But he's wonderful. So there you go. Just on to the future.
Well, I wasn't expecting to talk boxing. So, hold on. Callum, I thought he was with Eddie Hearn at Matchroom, or is that incorrect?
He's actually managed by Artisan Sports Management, give them the right name. And I bought a piece of Artisan because I like the guys, Paul Reddy and Sean O'Toole, who run the agency, become good friends of mine. And so put your money where your mouth is, Smith.
Hey, there truly a super agent across the board. My God, I did not know that. And by the way, huge boxing show, huge boxing show. So if Callum Smith needs somewhere to come and talk.
Yeah, well, I'll speak to Sean and see if we can get the boys on to have a chat with you in the next few weeks.
It only makes sense. Well, this is why you hook up with super agents. John, an absolute honor to have you here.
Seriously impressed with Woude,
that's it.
Seriously impressed. My God, the knowledge. That's serious. Yeah.
Hey, you're working with the best. What are you going to do? I mean, I don't include myself in that, but she is the best. I have to agree.
She's certainly out there.
I'm telling you. Oh, well, that's wonderful to hear. I mean, coming from you, I will pass that message on. But, John, let's get into it, because this is about you, and people like me who love football are eternally grateful, and we will discuss why they should partly attribute it to you in terms of thanking you. But let's start at the beginning. The book I think it's something I cannot wait to get my hands on, by the way. I've been reading and kind of watching your...
Copy on the table just because I do that stuff.
Absolutely. There it is.
The little
There
promotion.
it is, folks. No, a lot of promotion, the deal inside the world of a super agent, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Super agent, and how long has the book been out, and what is it you're trying to convey with the book, and then we can get into it.
Okay, I wrote it after I sold out. I sold out in 2011, 2012, and gave a little helping hand to my friend Seb Coe during the London Olympics. But I kind of sort of retired for a few years, and I had a lot of offers to write the book because I was fortunately there through all those wonderful times, through the 90s when we helped start the Premier League with Rupert Murdoch, and then we travelled all the way through the 90s and the noughties. And of course, before that, in the 80s, football wasn't that great. I mean, people were dying in stadia, which is doesn't get much worse than that. And yet I had this wonderful product, which was the England football team, and another little Argentine footballer called Diego Maradona in my stable. And so I had this aspiration to try and bring entertainment back to sport, because I'd been in the record business and I'd sold out previously, and I went to live in Los Angeles for a while. And I just loved what they were doing in sport, because sport for there was entertainment. Here it was sport, which I love, but it was sport. So I had this idea to come back and I had the name. We acquired the name first. The name First Artist, which was my company. I was sitting in my home in LA one night, and I think Dan Rather was the newsreader, and he said the final end piece of the news that night was that Dustin Hoffman and Barbra Streisand had junked this production company called First Artist, which made What's Up Doc and The Main Event. And it was a bit of a show business story, and I thought, I love that name. So seeing as they didn't want it, I took it, and I brought it back here, and that's the name we used to launch my idea of what sport should look like in England in the 90s.
Well, there you have it. And I'd like to take it back a little bit. Why did you get into it? Because you were in music before, you spoke about that, and then you had a life incident, and that through a concatenation of events, you came back. But eventually, maybe take us a little bit into the man that was first kind of, I don't know, went to America for whatever that reason was. So what is it that drove you to go to America in the first place?
I was very fortunate. I was one of the guys behind Northern Soul in the UK, and we had a string of big hits. And an American publishing company came and bought me out. But at the time, I was married to a wonderful lady called Lee, and sadly, she got sick in the last year of that negotiation. And she actually died the week I sold out. So I'd made I think it's all in the book. I made £1 million out of the sale, which £1 million is a lot of money now, but it was even more money in those days. And I was 29. I was a millionaire, and I had nothing to do, and I guess a broken heart and a life that I didn't know what to do. We didn't have any children. We had a big hairy dog called Scruff, but that's where I was, Scruff and me. And I decided, my friends were wonderful, and they spent a lot of time around me. In fact, so much that I had to go and breathe. So Lee and I bought a place in Los Angeles, and I thought, I'm going to spend a little bit of time over there. And I did. I actually spent off and on the best part of 3 years over there, in the bottom of a whiskey bottle, I have to admit, because I didn't really want to do anything else at the time. But in between alcoholic binges, I went and watched sport, and I went and watched the LA Raiders, and I loved what they did because it was entertainment. It was a show, it was a family. They were the Antichrist, they were the bad boys, and yet it was really an upbeat 3 hours in a sports stadium. And I thought, I want to do this. I want to do this with football, because that's my second heartbeat, football, and I want to do that. And I contacted a friend of mine, Paul Mariner, who was playing for Arsenal at the time, and was just leaving the England team. And I said, this is where luck, you have to have luck on your balance sheet. And Paul was just leaving the England team. And when I phoned him, he said, yeah, come back here because the England team have got an agent and he's retiring. And I think, if you want to do this, I'll help you and we'll try and be the agent for the England football team. So I flew back to England and we did a presentation to Bobby Robson and the England team. And it was there? Brian Robson was there, Peter Shilton, all those guys, really, really good guys. Ray Wilkins, who was an absolutely wonderful human being, sadly no longer with us. And anyway, long story short, I got the gig. So I've now been in business for less than a week, and I've got the entire England football team as my client. So we had this idea of bringing marketing ideas to football to boost the family element. Can I tell you a silly idea we had?
Please do. Please do.
So I had to connect with Coca-Cola in America. And by good chance, Steve Wright, who was the guy in Atlanta in America from Coca-Cola, was appointed head of Northern Europe for Coca-Cola. And I said, please, I want you to sponsor the England team. I want you to get involved, and I want you to do all the things that you do in America. And the FA really didn't want me to do anything because they had a major sponsorship with Umbro, and they said, that's it. You can't do anything. You can get into an open supermarket. And I wasn't keen on doing that. So we actually put a deal together, and Bobby Robson, bless him, said, okay, I'll run with this because it's for the good of the players, and if we bring Coca-Cola into football, how bad can that be? So we had this deal. The FA didn't like it, and I had to find ways of promoting it. So I sat down with the England team over the next 2 or 3 years, and they had a wonderful character in the team who I know love. Everyone loves him. That's Paul Gascoigne. And we worked out that if I could get Coca-Cola to advertise around the ground at Wembley or wherever they were, I'll tell the players before the game where the advertising boards are. And when they score, run and celebrate in front of that board. So it all worked, and you'd see, if you look back at some of the late 80s footage with the England team, you'll see them go, yeah, as they score, and then they're all like, all right, where do we go now? And they're all running around, and they see the board, because none of them listened to me before the game. They see the board, and they run there, and they celebrate in front of the board. And I went, yeah, we cracked this. This is brilliant. And I spoke to Coca-Cola about it, and they went, yeah, I'm not sure. We can't see the Coca-Cola advert. We're then celebrating it. So next England get together, I'm sitting down telling the lads, I'm not quite sure what we do with this. And Paul Gascoigne, bless him, said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to dive in front of the board and everyone can dive on top of me. And that is how diving in football started. That was it. Gascoigne started it. Nobody knows. And that's the truth of how diving started in football, apart from the fouls when they dive.
Yeah, I did not know. Oh, only Gaza.
Wonderful,
I mean,
wonderful man, Paul Gascoigne.
We're going to talk about another enigmatic figure, which you you kind of slipped his name in there, the other little Argentine, but you've brought Gaza up. I mean, sometimes we forget him because so much of what's been presented to us on the media front has turned into a tragic sort of Shakespearean tale. But my God, at the top of his game, is there anybody you could compare him to today that was like Gaza? Internationally,
he had that ability, because he was actually very strong, physically strong. He had that ability to ghost past people. And funnily enough, I'm sitting there with my boys last night watching Middlesbrough on television, who lost, and they've got
sorry to hear it.
They've got a player called Jed Spence, and he's a right back. He's a bit like Trent Alexander at Liverpool, but he's got that same Gascoigne-like ability because he's strong, physically strong up top. And a lot of people forget that. They think, you've got to be strong and fit with lots of legs. But I remember when we sold Gary Pallister to Man United, and Alex Ferguson said to me, God, you're a skinny little rake. He said, I'm going to put you in the gym for the next 6 months and we're going to bulk you up. And that's when he became a great centre-back, because he was strong. So this guy, Jed Spence at Middlesbrough, is astonishing. He's really strong. And I watched him last night. He's going through and he's just pushing them out the way. And Gascoigne had that innate ability because he had feet given him by God, and strength, which he worked on himself, and it was a great combination.
A great combination indeed. He was, you know, people forget what he was. When you think of Italia 90, you think of those tears of his, what a player he was. And that England era, Lineker and Co. and with him, and they really, with Robson, of course, anchoring the midfield. Heartbreak not to have won it with that.
But you know, that was the beginning of the Premier League. That's what attracted Murdoch to us, to help bring that, because as I said just before, the 80s were not great. People were dying. It was a bit of a, not great time in football. And when Murdoch saw what was happening in not just the game, obviously that's the most important thing, but was happening on the fringes around the England team, he rather liked to join it all up. And that's how it all came to be.
Now let's talk about that. Yeah, let's talk about that. You've brought up the Premier League. So before, the FA were kind of running the whole show, and it was obviously amateur, for lack of a better term, those terrible 80s. I mean, whether you talk about, was it Barnsley, Hillsborough, that was a dark, dark time for English football. And then we emerged into the 90s, and we could see where the football was going. How did the idea come about, and why did the idea come about for the Premier League to start?
The idea came about because the first division, as was, which is now the Premier League, owners of the football club said we had to share our income with 72 other clubs. That's the top 20, as it was 22, so it was actually 70. So we earn 90% of the income. We have to give it all to the other clubs, and we keep a small bit. We want our own show. The FA weren't really involved. They're just a licensing authority that sits at the top. So the Football League were the obstacle. So there was Division 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we've got the Premier League, which was 1, the Championship, which was 2, and 3 and 4 are now Division 1 and 2, which may even have to go part-time unless the government give money, but that's another story. So
a whole other story.
So it was driven by the key people like Philip Carter from Everton, David Dean from Arsenal, and that group of people who drove financially motivated. There's nothing wrong in that, by the way. Their clubs were deriving most of the income and then giving it all away. And the FA were relatively sanguine in this, but they needed to be convinced to give the authority, otherwise it could never happen. And that was the process. And it was only really when Murdoch turned up and said, yeah, I'll bankroll this, that it became a reality.
So what, did he just pop over on his private jet from Australia and pop on over and say, hey, you guys, I like you, here's some money? I mean, so where were you? How were you involved in the process?
He knew what was going on. He made contact with the seniors that I told you about. They told the FA that they had a new deal. And then there was, I think, about a year and a half of negotiation. And there was a seminal moment, actually. I mean, I actually came in a bit later, because I was brought in to make it happen. There was a seminal moment. And nobody's written about this. Nobody knows this really, but everyone thinks it was 3 or 4.
Are we breaking news?
It's
are we breaking news on the show?
I'm not.
Big time show here. Big time. Super agent John Smith, breaking news. I got to do a drum roll. Please go ahead. It's not really
a breaking news story, but it's the real story. And the real story is that the conversations went back and forth. And obviously the rest of the Football League clubs didn't want to know about it. And the Football Association had to be the broker, the honest broker in the middle of it. They were the licensing authority, and FIFA wouldn't sanction another league unless the FA, before that, the FA had sanctioned it themselves. So there was a bit of an impasse. And there was one very big meeting, which I sat at the back of the room for, where a lady at the FA, an administrator called Pat Smith, no relative. Pat Smith was married to the chief accountant at the FA, Mark, nice guy. And she was like, I got on very well with her. A lot of people thought she was a bit of a dragon because she was a very harsh administrator and stuck in that mold of we are where we are, where we've been, where we are. And as the speeches went on in that particular meeting, everyone was there. She stood up, and she's only a little girl, so she had to stand on a chair. I remember this. She had to stand up on a chair, And she gave this Churchillian speech about it's time. We've reached a moment in time where we have to change the face of English football. And everyone went, sorry? And she spoke for 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And as she stepped down, everyone in the room knew the Premier League was coming. That was the changing moment. This older fashioned administrator had actually sanctioned the way forward because she knew the reality of it all. And had it not been for that, the Premier League may never have happened. It was just one of those bizarre and wonderful moments.
You should have claimed her as a relative. It would have been convenient. Smith, it was all us.
She's not. I can't claim Callum Smith. I can't claim Pat Smith. But I will if it's convenient.
Hey, the Smiths are doing all right across the board. Great band, great boxers, great agents. They started the Premier League, so not too bad for the Smith brand right now.
We're all right. We're doing. Actually, we were never Smith. We came out of Poland. My family name was Schmidek, and we became Smith as we came into this country some years ago.
Oh, how about that? Okay.
What's your name? And my grandfather, allegedly great grandfather, had a stammer, and he went and they said Smith next.
Oh man, I absolutely love that. And you then change the face of entertainment forever. I think it's very clear to anybody who's honest. And I loved one of your interviews. What you said is the second biggest entertainment in this world to sex is football, but the Premier League is the gold or platinum standard. And what I've seen is after Roman Abramovich came, of course, there was the dominant era of Manchester United and what they did. But when Roman Abramovich came, he changed everything. What do you think of that foreign investment in the English Premier League? Has it, and we'll speak a bit more about the rest, but what do you think of foreign investment in general?
Look, I have no issue with it. I think it's helped create, I think the foreign money, the foreign understanding, the cultural inspiration that it gives us, I think is phenomenal. I mean, if you look at your own continent, look at the players we've sucked in from Africa. Look at the talent that is on display, and raw African talent that I think we kind of hone that talent and we put it in our system, and it works. And it works better than anywhere else in the world. It may not help the England team win World Cups, but as an entertaining entity, for me, it's the best entertainment on the planet. I'm slightly biased. But, it's not a rose without thorns, because it brings with different ways of negotiating. So you're negotiating now with Asian businessmen who very often have third, fourth, fifth parties in their deals because they do, and because of history, and it's a bit of a barter. And so we're now paying away fees to third parties, fourth parties that aren't registered football entities. And in this country, we call it corruption. But
let's give it the...
They were there doing that before we even existed. So it's not corruption.
Correct. I'd like to drill in a little bit on that point. I think you've made a great point here. Is Sam Allardyce got in a lot of trouble? The former manager of your football club got in trouble. Before, of course, I mean, he got sacked, and then I think it was Bruce Reich for a single year before Wenger came. But George Graham got in trouble for this. The British term is a bung payment. Now, let's talk about what that is and because you spoke about the different cultures around the world. Perhaps you could give us an anecdote. I know they negotiate differently in Italy, for instance, in Spain, for instance, the kind of negotiations and the way you get deals across the line. Do you have anything anecdotal for us that might explain to our listeners what you mean when you say there's different ways of business? Perhaps you've done, give me an example in Italy, perhaps, that you've gone through, which maybe...
I can talk for hours about this. How long have we got? Look, let me do, without naming names here, because this is not the right forum to do that, but without naming names, some of the ways where it's wrong is when an ownership comes in and they have other businesses in other parts of the world, and they are resident in the UK, and they they buy a footballer and they pay an agent, say they have a 3, 4, 5 million pound deal, which is relatively small in our market now, and somehow the agent earns 1.8 million, which doesn't quite stack up. You just know that money is gone to the agent to be placed somewhere overseas where perhaps these guys can get their hands on it in a tax-free form. So it's those sorts of things that you watch for, and that the FA and FIFA are trying to close down, and to a degree are being fairly successful now, because there's a whole new system coming in next year based on the TMS system, transfer matching system, which again is another story. But anyway, that's coming in next year. The Italians I love because very often it's emotional led. So I remember sitting in my first meeting when it wasn't going very well, and at one point they all got up and walked out, except they didn't. There were 4 of them on the other side of the table. They didn't quite move fast enough to get out. Took a long time to put this stuff in their cases, and you could see that. Fortunately, I had other things to say, but I realized that when they got really close to the door and they were looking back, I had something to say. So they then came back and we started again. And I thought, you know what? This is a tactic. This is being used to buy time, to let us both try and find. It's an impossible point. So we're going bye-bye, but we're not really going.
Sure.
So, and I've got to tell you, on so many occasions in Italy, they did the same. The other party, the same thing. They go, no, John, no. And they got up and walked out. And I always had a bit of something in my back pocket by that point. And actually, I used to park my briefcase, which is a great negotiating trick. You park your briefcase sort of behind you, but you can't touch it. You got to walk to it. And you'd say, excuse me a moment. And you buy yourself the time by walking to your briefcase. And that gives you the ability to turn around and face them. By this time, everyone's standing in the room. They're expecting you to say something. So it just buys you that time and buys you the platform. And I actually learned a few negotiating tactics. Can I tell you one?
Please do. Please do.
One of the best ones, when you're in a real hard, and I had some horrible, not right to say horrible, I had some really tough guys sitting opposite me, like Alan Sugar or Ken Bates. I mean, I really enjoyed them, but they were tough guys. But very often the agent's the bad boy. And I learned, somebody told me who, years and years ago, I had a very bad stammer. I couldn't talk, and I was cured by a guy who actually beat me up and taught me to speak again. And he taught me a lot of tricks. And one of them was, when you're one-to-one, I mean, I'm looking at you in the camera. I don't know, it's obviously different because we are in a different country. And if you look at someone's eyes, you'll blink, because you do, because it's a reaction to the other person's eyes. If I look at you, Mbelo, in the bridge of your nose, I will never blink. Ever, ever, ever. I can sit here all night and just look at your nose. And it's really disconcerting to the other person. You just do that and you answer and you're looking, and because everyone does this, and they look away and they negotiate and they make a note on their paper. So I don't. I just sit there. And it's really disconcerting. Okay. So just
all right. Well, I like that. I'm going to go into the boss's office on Monday and ask for a raise, and that is my tactic. Now, you were speaking about the other ways of doing business. Now, you mentioned a name. His first name is Diego. Now, he was one of your clients. And what was the moment? Because I heard you tell the story, but I would love to rehear it. When you, of course, had Maradona as your one of your clients, one of your very first clients. Ozzy Ardell, as I understand, organized that deal. Tottenham, great player. Not a good player. It's an overused word, great. Ozzy Ardell is great player. My God, part of that 86 great Argentina team. Now, what happened with Maradona? And I'd like you to take us right up until the last moment you saw him.
This was all about luck. I'd phoned Ozzy because I'd heard I'd been in the business for a short while with the England team, and I'd heard Ozzy was an ex-lawyer, bright guy, and a good guy to know. So I'd managed to get a number for him. I called him, and I'd arranged to see him. And then the traffic going to his house in North London was bad, and I couldn't make it. And the second time, I had a family issue and had to cancel again. So this is my third attempt at meeting with Ozzy, which is important in the story because had I have gone the first two times, this incident on the third time wouldn't have happened in my company. So I'm sitting there, we're talking, we're having a very pleasant conversation, and the phone rings, and I can hear him talking. So I just walk down the corridor, go to the loo. As I'm coming back, he's going in Spanish, yeah, Diego, sure, Diego, and he's talking. And he puts his hand over the phone and he says to me, it's Diego. And stupid mutt here says, Diego who? He says, Maradona. I went, oh, okay. So he's now got Maradona on the phone, and I'm now standing by his side trying to understand what's going on. Long story short, he'd wanted to split with his agent, and Ozzy was his friend, and he wanted Ozzy to look after him. So Ozzy said to me, he came back in the room, he said, do you fancy working with Diego Maradona with me? I went, yeah, I don't think I need much time to think about that one, Ozzy. So, yeah, so we did, and we did a few things with him. We did, I have this silly little line that I got him his first Coke deal, but it was the black stuff, not the white stuff.
Oh, very good. Very good. Touche.
We did all sorts of great things and fun things with him. I remember getting him a special pass he had a collection of Ferraris at his home in Naples, which he was always very proud to show me when I went there. And
I'm sure.
But they always used to get beaten up because the streets of Naples were really, really small, and he'd drive through them and people would jump on his car. And it was just, he was like a god down there. And so I got him special dispensation to drive through red traffic lights when he was in Naples. Which really
what a life you've lived. And then, of course, there was a moment when you had to, I believe in the way I read it or I heard you tell it before, then there was a time in Naples where he ceased to be your agent. Talk us what happened in that moment, and you never saw him again as your client.
No, we'd been off and on with him for 3 or 4 years. It'd been good. I wasn't there all the time because I was in London. He was in Naples. But he got an increasing crowd of people around him. And there was always one guy called Nestor Girasito who I really liked. And he used to sit down on the sofa in Diego's lounge with me and go, what are all these people here? Why are they here? And some of them, you could see they were another organization, shall we say. So we were quite friendly with them, but there was a distance. And, I was outside of that distance. I was on the other side of it. And then one day, some months later, I'm sitting there with Diego, and I had a little conversation. It was a bit cold because Diego was always quite warm with me. It was a little bit cold. I thought, well, maybe he's got things on his mind. And about 20 minutes later, 2 of the guys walked in and said, John, we need to have a conversation. And took me to another room, and they said, we just want to say thank you to you. I said, okay, you're very welcome. What have I done? They said, no, we'd like to say thank you. And I went, anyway, you are very welcome. And goodbye. And I said, sorry? And they said, no, thank you and goodbye. And they gave me their hands to shake. And I said, what do you mean? They said, no, your services are no longer required. And I'm looking at them, and the door of that room was ajar, and I'm looking outside, and I can see Diego down the corridor, and he's looking away. He knew what was going on. And we never got to say goodbye. When those guys tell you that your time's up, I guess you have to sign out. So I did. There wasn't texts or WhatsApps or whatever to do in those days, so I phoned Diego a few times, but he didn't call back. I met him about 7 or 8 years later, and it was all hugs and kisses and very nice, but, we kind of moved on. And then I was staging the London, in London 2 years ago, the FIFA Best Awards. And he was one of the guests on the green carpet, and I was one of the organizers. And as he's walking up the green carpet, I just stood myself right in the middle, so he couldn't pass me. And he looked at me and he went, ah! And he was lovely. And that's the past.
Oh. What a story. One of the most enigmatic lightning rods in football history. John, I know you have to go and your time has been precious. I want to ask you one more question before I have to let you go. The Arsenal.
Yeah.
What do we think of the Wenger years? And how long do you think it'll take them to get back to the great 90s and the Wenger's prime years? The Wenger years, how do you look upon those? 17 years, no trophy. He won, of course, 3 titles for your great club. How do you look on Wenger? Did he stay too long?
Yeah, and I told him that to his face. I'm a huge fan of Wenger. He was one of the reasons the Premier League was successful. He was the reason why Arsenal was successful. He changed the psyche in our game. He made the beautiful game prettier. He changed the food regimes, and so he, and also to a lesser degree, Ruud Gullit, because they were there at the same time, didn't have the same amount of footballing success. His scouting system was fantastic. He was a wonderful human. He is a wonderful human being. But it takes time, Arsenal, nothing does that forever. So Arsenal have now done that. Even if you look at what Klopp's done at Liverpool, it's taken 4 years. And, you'd have to say, if Arteta is the man, and I hope he is, it's going to take him a similar time. It could be 4 or 5 years before you see Arsenal back in contention again. But I'm obviously, if you cut me, I bleed red. I'm still there. I'm still a fan, even though I've probably done more deals with Tottenham than I've done with Arsenal. But even so, which is a strange anomaly for a Gooner. But you go where you have to do what you do. Can I just before I go, I wanted to say one thing, if I may. I want to tell you.
I've got all the time in the world for you. I know you're on a time schedule, though.
Okay. I just want to tell you this because I remembered it when you asked me to join you, which I've been very honoured to do. And I hope I haven't just talked too much. I was asked after my work with the Premier League. I was asked by Trevor Phillips when the South African Soccer Premier League started to come and talk to the Premier League owners. And so they flew me to Johannesburg, where you are now, I know. And they sat me at a table, and all the owners were around the table. This was a long time ago. The Premier League had just started. Kaiser Chiefs were there, and everyone. And before we began the meeting, Trevor said, "Okay, guys, this is John Smith. Explain who I was and what I'd done." He said, "Now, before we begin, I want arms on the table." So I thought this very strange. I put my arms down, and out came the guns. And they were on the What am I doing here?
Yes, so arms here meant literally put your arms on the table. Oh, man. John, that is a sensational. John, I know you've got, listen, they say happy wife, happy life. I know you are on a tight schedule. Do you have time to take 1 or 2 questions from our adoring public?
I'm very happy to do so, of course.
All righty, let's get straight to it. Dave, what we got going there?
Oh, I can see that one. The Ukrainian boys. Yeah. Do you want me to answer that? It's on the screen.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead and read it, and you can answer it.
How was it dealing with the Ukrainian mafia? That must have been insane. Yeah, I mean, one mafia, Ukrainian mafia, Italian mafia, I guess, they're all out the same eggshell, but they're not really. I got flown into the Ukraine to talk about quite a big football transfer at the time. And we got taken to this resort in the bottom of the Baltic Sea called Odessa. And as they picked us up, they took me to my hotel, and there was a shooting. 2 people got shot in front of us. And they whipped us back into the car. And there was a civil war going on at that time. I think Putin had just invaded Crimea, and a lot of crap was going on down there. And they put me in a safe house with my 2 buddies at the time. Peter Story, who used to be chief executive of Portsmouth, was with me, and also Roberto De Fanti, a big Italian agent. And they put us in this house, and they locked us in there. And it was one house in a street, and it became evident that we had been we'd been kidnapped. They weren't going to let us go. We'd gone to do a soccer deal, and they didn't want to let us go because we hadn't switched our mobile phones off or something, and they blamed us for the guys that got shot. It was there were lots of territorial groups going on at the time. And we were with this group who we thought was the official party for this football club, which obviously the football club was owned in part by some of the gangs. And we'd been told everything was fine, it was okay. The Foreign Office hadn't warned us. It was all, and obviously it obviously wasn't. And we were there for a week, and they didn't feed us very well. And then in the end, they said, "You're gonna have to pay to get out now, boys." So we didn't have to pay that much, funnily enough. It wasn't huge, and they took credit cards, which I thought was bizarre. I actually paid the ransom fee with a credit card. I got air miles from my.
Oh, that's outrageous. All right, let me hit you with one more. I've got Kyle Hendricks. That story's out of this world, by the way. I mean, but your life has been something else. And John, I know everybody wants your attention, but you're going to have to come back because there's so much platinum ground left to cover. But they say happy wife, happy life. I don't want to keep you away from the family. Kyle Hendricks says, what's the most interesting deal you've ever been a part of? And I think that would be a great way to end what's been a magnificent chat.
It's very difficult to answer that because every deal has its own. I mean, the one that's given me the most satisfaction was years ago, Kevin Phillips playing at Watford and not doing very well and going out the game. He was going to join Basildon out of the Football League. And we said, my brother Phil Smith and myself said to Peter Reid at Sunderland, we just think he's what you need. Just try him. Will you just have him for a week and see what you think? And Peter liked him, and he signed, and he became one of the Sunderland heroes. He was the icon for about 8 years. He was Super Kevin Phillips, and he was the superstar of the club. And it just shows you, it just needs a little bit of faith and a little bit of if you're a good agent and you know where your player could fit, and you support your player well. There's some really good guys in the game who actually helped the game happen. And that was probably one of my proudest moments.
Quite rightly. By the way, people who don't remember, Kevin Phillips got 30 goals in the Premier League, was part of the original big man, little man in the Premier League. Great. I mean, we're talking about big man, little man. He got 30 goals Sunderland. People need to know that. In the Premier League. Yeah. Great player. Fantastic finisher, and lucky that he didn't get more England caps. But I didn't know he was one of your players.
Yeah, we had at our height we had about 400, and just to finish on a silly one, we had a German player coming in once who was. It's taken 6 months to do this deal because he was a very awkward individual, which is why I'm not going to name him particularly at the moment. And when we finally did the deal, and my office is sorting out his transport across from Hamburg to London, and my secretary calls me early in the morning. She says he wants to come on the ferry, and I said, "Well, no, we don't really want him on a ferry. Why would we want him on the ferry? Just book him a flight." And no, because he wants to put his dog on the ferry. And I said, "No, he can't bring his dog. And in those days there was quarantine if you brought dogs into the UK." I said, "Yeah, you can bring him, but he's going to have to go into quarantine." So she phoned him, and he called me about 15 minutes later. And bear in mind, it's been 6 months, and we're making, I don't know, about £250,000 on this. So it's not it's not a cheap lunch. And he would not come if he couldn't bring his dog. I said, "Well, you can visit him every day, but you can't have him for 6 months. He's in quarantine." But, "No, that's it. Deal's off." So that was it. We earned a big round number. We earned a big round number, and he didn't come. No.
Unbelievable. 6 months, and because of his dog, you couldn't. It beggars belief. Listen, John, this has been unbelievable, and I'm going to need you to come back. It's been an absolute honor, and and our audience here does not get gems like yourself, people that were at the forefront of it all. And it is an absolute honor to speak.
My wife just walked past me when you said gems. She's just giggled.
Yeah, so she was wondering who I'm talking about. John, can't be him. Listen, it's been an honor. I don't want to keep you from dinner. Enjoy your outing. And John, you're going to have to come back because what we've got to talk about and what you've given has been incredible. Ladies and gentlemen, the original super agent, Mr. John Smith.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
An absolute honor to have him, because there was so much more to get to, but he has just got, listen, when a guy says I was the agent for Diego Maradona, there's no ways I couldn't let him finish that story. Kidnapped in the Ukraine, he paid his release on a credit card. This guy, what a life. 400 players at a time in his agency. John Smith, part of forming, of course, he was also a part, and something we'll get to in the future, he brought the NFL to the United Kingdom. Part of organizing that original deal. The NBA, with this guy has been everywhere. Kidnapped in the Ukraine, Diego Maradona, the Napolitana mafia separated him from Diego Maradona. It's the stuff of a movie. And that is it for Friday. It's been a different ball game. It's been incredible. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the type of guests we will continue to bring you from around the world. From all of us here at Cliff Central and Big Shot Media, of course, we are changing the landscape forevermore. The sports content revolution in Africa is underway. Have a blessed, safe, and be awesome this weekend, ladies and gentlemen. This week, it's been a different ball game.